Going to convene the March 5th Board of Commissioners meeting. You may have, before we rise, I'm going to just make a notice. We're running the missing woman formation here. Our chair, normal chair, is not absent. She's absent today from here, but she's representing this board and the fine folks of Scott County and DC at a National Association of Counties meeting. So appreciate Commissioner Barb Weckman-Brecky for doing that this day. So I will be running the meeting, and I'm looking to these guys to try to keep those guys honest today. We'll see how that goes. So as we start, let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We've all received the agenda in our packets. Is there any changes to the amendments? No changes. Entertain a motion on the agenda.
Mr. Chair, isn't there an amendment here?
We are going to go, that's on the consent.
Okay.
We're going to address that on the consent.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Looking to make a motion to approve this agenda.
Mr. Chairman, I suppose I could make the motion to approve the agenda as it's stated.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, no.
Oh, here we go, here we go. Here we go. All in favor of the agenda as stated?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Now we're going to move to the minutes. We've all received the minutes in our packet. Any discussion, any changes, anything you see in the minutes you want to make a change to or entertain a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second? Look at that, we got a second. Any discussion on the minutes?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll withhold my comments on the minutes.
All right, very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right, number 4, recognition of interested citizens. This is a time when folks can have an opportunity to come to the podium and have a discussion or ask us or talk to us about anything that's not on the agenda. Great opportunity to do that. I'm not seeing anyone jump at
Hold
the...
on there, Mr. Chairman. We paid 2 or 3 people to be here and heckle you.
Okay,
They
all
might
right,
be
let's...
outside.
Anyone outside? Is there anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Anyone? No one? Barb's
Shoot.
thinking about it. She's thinking about it.
That was good money wasted.
All right, moving on to the consent agenda then. I saw someone moving. No one's coming up. Consent agenda there, before I go through this, I just want to make a mention that there is a edit to 5.11. And I will discuss that as we get to that point. I guess I could do it now. 5.11, there is a math edit on the second page of that particular item. I'll give you a second to go there if you'd like. There was a $5,000 edit on 2 different lines. So it does, in our packet it reads 576,000, it should read 571,000 for the land records dedicated funds, and for the veteran services grant, in the packet it reads 10,000, it should read 15,000. Other way around, other way around.
The other way around,
Other way around.
Commissioner. There was a change in the veterans funding that went from 15,000 to 10,000, and that 5,000 will come from the land records fund. It did not change the amount of contract at all.
Thank you for that clarification, appreciate that. So that is 511. Is there anything specific before I go through and read this that you'd like to pull?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to have 5.8 just briefly explained, and I did call ahead and tell the county administrator that I wish to have that pulled from consent. Have a brief explanation, and then I'll move it.
Fair enough. Let me read through the consent here. 5.1, approve the request for rezoning of 76.98 acres from A1, Agricultural Preservation District, to A3, Agricultural Preservation Density District. Colin Neeson applicant, Elizabeth Neeson estate property owner in Section 32 of Belle Plaine Township. 5.2, approve the request for a conditional use permit amendment for Action Overhead Garage Door. Action Overhead Garage Door LLC applicant, Demcon Properties LLC property owner, to expand the existing facility in Section 17 of Credit River Township. 5.3, approve the request for final plat of Harvest Bluffs Second Edition, on-site marketing applicant and property owner. consisting of 12 lots on 34.4 acres in Section 26 of Spring Lake Township. 5.4, approve the renewal application for a consumption and display permit for 2019 for Minnesota Harvest LLC located in St. Lawrence Township. 5.5, approve the renewal application for an intoxicating liquor license for 2019 for Creeks Bend Golf Course Incorporated in Cedar Lake Township. 5.6, approve the renewal application for a 3-2 beer license for 2019 for Sean O'Neill, DBA Union Hill Baseball Association, located in Belle Plaine Township. 5.7, approve the application and acceptance of Sauer Family Foundation grant funds. And 5.8, was that the one that you wanted to pull?
Yes, please.
Okay, that's the approve abatement of a 2019 property assessed Clean Energy PACE special assessment requested by St. Paul Port Authority for a property located in Blakely Township, which we'll pull and have a discussion on. 5.9, adopt resolution 2019.024, authorizing entering into a cooperative agreement with the City of Savage for cost participation in the County Highways 42 and 27 intersection area traffic study. 5.10, adopt resolution number 2019-025, awarding a contract to William Mueller & Sons Incorporated for overlaying, sign replacement, and seal coating of various county highways. Uh, 5.11 was, as discussed, the edit. Adopt resolution number 2019-026, authorizing entering into a contract with U.S. Imaging Incorporated for digital imaging services of legacy documents for land records, vital statistics, veteran services, county administration, and sheriff records. 5.12, adopt resolution number 2019-027, supporting the repeal of the Dan Patch commuter rail line, prohibitions, 2002 Minnesota State Law, Chapter 393, House File 3618, Section 85, enabling the state of Minnesota, the Met Council, and the regional rail authorities to study the Dan Patch commuter rail line. 5.13, adopt resolution number 2019-028, supporting legislation authorizing infrastructure development fees. And 5.14, approve payroll processing of personnel actions. That is the consent agenda with 5.8 pulled for a little further discussion. Who's going to be discussing that one?
Mr. Chair, if I might offer some process advice, usually we approve the ones that are still on consent.
Let's approve
and
the
then we
ones
get
on
back to
consent,
the
then we'll
ones
come
that are-
back to that one.
Sure.
See, my elder statesman, he's going to guide me the whole way.
I'll
He
make a
was going to
motion.
guide me the whole way.
I'll make a motion less 5.8.
That's 5.8, yeah.
Second.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion on those minus 5.8? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. 5.8,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This has generated some discussion in my previous life, and I remember when we approved this one, but now I see it's back for an abatement from the St. Paul Port Authority. I understand it's pretty routine because of construction delays.
Correct.
But anytime the word taxes, abatement, and St. Paul are used in the same sentence, I think we probably owe it to the public just to clarify what's going on. So that's my purpose for pulling this one, Mr. Chairman.
So Commissioners, my name is Ellen Paulson. I'm the Taxation Supervisor. And the reason that we were requested by the St. Paul Port Authority to grant an abatement on this is because that the construction did not complete, so that they are unable to utilize the solar array at this time, and having them pay the special assessment back without having the benefit of the energy efficiency gains would be burdensome to the taxpayer. So PACE had agreed with the lender to request an abatement so that they would start paying this in 2020 instead of 2019. The rest of the abatement would continue, or excuse me, the rest of the special assessment would continue.
Mr. Chair, if I can just have a brief discussion with Ms. Paulson. So describe to us why the St. Paul Port Authority is involved again. Refresh my
Certainly.
memory.
So just a little background. We had entered into an agreement with the St. Paul Port Authority some years back that this could be a means of financing for property owners, that they would be able to add a special assessment to their property, so the property owner actually requests it, and then the St. Paul Port Authority acts as the agency that places the special assessment. We collect the funds through the tax bill, pay the St. Paul Port Authority, and then they pay the lender on behalf of the property owner. And it gives them a means other than mortgage or something to borrow funds, because usually something like this that's energy efficient is going to be very expensive for them.
So, Mr. Chair, Ms. Paulson, then, the St. Paul Port Authority is acting as a banker in this case.
Essentially, there is a lender, but they're acting as the collection agency, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah, manager of funds.
And so the abatement is for the payment on the principal and interest for the cost of installing the array, not the underlying real estate taxes on the property involved.
Correct.
That's what I was, one of the things I was trying to get
Okay,
at. So,
sorry, yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I think that makes it clear what's going on here.
Yeah,
And
so no taxes are being abated, it's just the special assessment collection for the solar array funding.
Correct. Thank you. Absent any other discussion, then I'll make a motion to approve the abatement of the 2019 property assessed clean energy special assessment on this particular property and move its adoption.
Second?
I'll second.
Second, any discussion? I would just like to say thanks for pulling that, because I think that made sense to have a little more clarity on that. So there is a motion and a second. Let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate that. So now we're going to move to 6.1. We're going to receive information on Scott County Mental Health Local Advisory Council. Barb Dahl, and I believe is it Stadler?
Yes.
Barb, how are you?
Good. Yes, Commissioner Beer and Commissioners, Barb Dahl, I'm the Social Services Director with Scott County. And the purpose of the next agenda item is for the County Board and the public to receive information regarding the Scott County Mental Health Local Advisory Council. The Comprehensive Mental Health Act of 1987 and the Children's Mental Health Act of 1989 require that counties have a local advisory council. We can either choose to operate those separately or together, and we operate ours together. Our Mental Health Advisory Council is comprised of individuals that either have a lived experience, have a loved one that has a lived experience, or they're professionals in the field of mental health. And so they have experience, firsthand knowledge of the systems, and they can help inform on planning and evaluate our systems and make recommendations. And that's what John Stadler is here to do today, is to provide the annual report from the LAC and provide recommendations to the board as he's done in previous years. And before I hand it over to John, I just have to say that this is John's 4th year as the chair. Janet Williams has been the vice chair with him during that same amount of time and have been committed LAC members way before then. And I just have to say, we have a really active LAC. I've been told we have one of the best in the state, and if there's a way that you could cast a ballot, I would certainly vote in that favor. So we're very lucky to have this group of committed, engaged individuals that can help inform us on service delivery, and I really think can impact better services for our citizens.
Thank you, Barb. Commissioners, guests, the Scott employees, on behalf of the LAC, Local Area Council on Mental Health for Scott County, I'd like to make a presentation. But before I do that, I'd like to explain a little bit about who I am. I'm a resident of Savage and a passionate volunteer for mental health. We've had mental health issues in our family, and so it's brought to my attention that it's an important topic to speak up on and promote both education, awareness, understanding, and call to action. So that's why I'm here. I've been, as Barb said, 4 years. I've been very, very happy to participate in the group. It's a very good group. So as Barb mentioned, our job is to really make awareness and understanding in the community, and as board members who are made up of multiple members, and to make recommendations to you on an annual basis that we're required. And what I'd like to do is just a brief review of 2018, and in 2018 we spent quite a bit of time on education. And NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, We attended meetings, we participated in their presentations, and invited them to our board to help educate our members and to bring greater light and understanding that mental health is an illness, a brain chemistry issue, just like any other illness, and for them to help us understand what we can do and our recommendations to you. We did have a legislative session, which is something we do each and every year, and it's very well attended. And this year we had 50 incumbents, candidates, Scott County officials, and local interested members. The session was focusing on removing the stigma. And the stigma is a big part of this. And what we mean by remove the stigma, it's allowing people to accept that it's an illness and understanding and acceptance. And by removing the stigma, then there's progression and care for the individual. In addition to that, we had presentations and open dialogue on mental health and services and support in Scott County, and opportunities for change and improvement of services. The session was well received and well attended by each elected official as part of the LIC educational program. And it's useful and helpful to bring parties together like this, as some are elected officials and some are being elected into positions, hopefully. And through this process, we hope they take with them information that when they do legislative activities, that they can support those that live with the illness. One of the more fascinating things that happened in the last year that you're probably aware of and have supported is the IRT Center that's going to be in Savage. And IRT stands for Intensive Residential Treatment Center for those living with mental illness or either prevention and or hospitalization. They move on from those situations into a facility for a period of about 90 days. And during that 90 days, they're offered the opportunity to reintegrate into society, to adapt, and then hopefully live a fulfilling life. In 2018, Scott County secured the state bonding allocated for $1.9 million to assist with the consolidation of construction of a new facility. In addition, just recently, there was an additional $2.26 million was recently awarded to Scott County through the Department of Health and Human Services grant that will support the capital associated with the building and construction. Therefore, due to the success of securing state funding and through collaboration between the City of Savage, the Scott County Development Authority, and the Guild Incorporated, which will manage the facility, a 16-bed IRT Center will soon be under construction. Coming up on the 20th of this month, there will be a neighborhood meeting at 7 o'clock in the Savage City Hall in the City Council chambers. This is a substantial progress. IRT centers are very hard to build in cities and facilities because people just don't want them in their neighborhood. But what I can tell you, they are the most productive way of helping those with illnesses to reintegrate into society. And they really are not problems. They very seldom present any kind of issues in the society. And if you think about 16 beds in 90 days, people are rotating through on a regular basis. That's quite a few people during the course of the year. One of the other major contributions that were made in this last year was the new crisis team. And that's been something that's been discussed for many years with the LAC. And the LAC identified as a principal need for a dedicated mobile crisis center. Mobile meant that they actually go out to wherever the crisis is, to the home, to the work setting, to wherever that might be. Through the collaboration of the Scott County Commissioners, yourselves, Scott County staff, and other community stakeholders, Canvas Health was awarded a contract to provide the services, which started April 2nd of this last year, 2018. Here's what's very important. Prior to that, many of these calls or needs were not being met. Canvas provided both phone and on-site support which will allow those who need to receive appropriate services in the moment. In addition, in the first 9 months of their operation, Canvas received over 1,000 calls and over 192 face-to-face visits. That means they went out in their vehicles to the point of crisis, whether it be a home, an individual's workplace, whatever the case might be, in the community. They are also co-located at the Scott County Law Enforcement Center. So that's a very positive thing because there's great collaboration between the Scott County Sheriff Department and law enforcement and the folks at the crisis team. I'd like to share two stories, because I think stories tell a lot of truth about what goes on. So when Canvas Health started, they're very businesslike, and they focused on building relationships. Relationships were key to their success, so they worked with all Scott County enforcement once they were awarded the contract to establish those relationships and what they did and how they could work with them and understanding what the local law enforcement needs were so that they could work with them on their specific needs. They worked in close partnership with each of them, as I mentioned, and then also with the Scott County Sheriff's Office through mobile response and working through, and this is important with the Scott County, as we know the jail's next door, working with the Scott County jail inmates should there be a crisis of need in the realm of mental health and making, giving advice on what they could do to help them. So that's an additional feature that they brought on board that has made a difference. So here's several examples. In one situation, they de-escalated an eviction situation where the person suspected is living with mental illness and potentially violent towards law enforcement. Canvas Health was able to de-escalate the situation so that law enforcement could work with the person on a safe eviction of the property. So the individual was, not necessarily friendly to the police, and there was an eviction need, and there was suspect of mental health issues, and they were able to de-escalate it to a positive outcome. And that's a real life example, and you can imagine how it could go many different ways, but this was a very positive way. Canvas has also worked with families in those situations where they worked with a person in mental health crisis, where there was a real fear of suicide by firearm. Canvas was able to work with the person and to bring the situation to a peaceful outcome. That's a life possibly saved. They also work with Scott County Sheriff's Department to provide gun locks. So Scott County Sheriff's Department provides gun locks. Now imagine going on a site where there is an active gun involved in the situation. And as a result, they're able to lock the guns, give it, whatever the situation is, give them to a responsible person in the home, and no longer is the gun a threat to that individual or to their particular family. And they bring that with them on all their calls. It provides an extra layer, an extra level of security in the home itself. So the last comments that I have to make is, in the call to action, and this is something that we're on a continuous basis that we're doing, which is increasing awareness. So increasing support and education surrounding mental health to remove the stigma and to provide more early access to services. As individuals and citizens of Scott County, this is something we can all do. It doesn't take a special skill or a special knowledge base. It's a matter of listening and understanding and providing support for those in need. Mental health resources, support organizations to provide programs to promote growth and development of those living with mental health illness, to allow them to be valued members of society. A key statement, valued members of society. And I would diverge just a slight bit. You're probably familiar for the Guild Incorporated, who does job placement in Scott County. They won a state and national award for their work in years past. They actually have people working at Hy-Vee in Savage. And the person was working behind one of the counters and saw the development manager and said, "This is the first time I've worked in years. I have meaning and purpose in my life and a means to pay my bills. I'm no longer a burden on society, but feel fulfilled." These are all the real possibilities through programs that are possible for people to achieve self-sufficiency to whatever level they can, but the pride in being part of society. Housing remains, as we all know, a consideration. And one of the unfortunate things, or fortunate things, with the market today with housing is that the affordability is difficult. It's especially true for those who live with mental illness. There's a lack of affordable housing options as the current rental rate is at 0.9%, a remarkably low number vacancy rate, while a healthy rate is about 5%. In addition, there's no emergency shelters for single adults, even limited options for family. Homeless and support for those in need remains a major issue in Scott County and does additional public support for housing. So we're still looking for and making recommendations for public housing for those in need, specifically for families, because the tradition is if you don't have a house, you go to a friend, a relative, you stay there a week or two, whatever. Imagine having children that are in school. What a burden that is on them, and certainly health care and their ability to get the local services that they have. That's my presentation today. I'm certainly answering any questions that you might have.
Questions, comments?
Just a comment, we are really celebrating with you the additional money for the IRTs. That was really a great thing, and we're excited to see that facility built. I support it as a commissioner and in my role here, but I also personally support it. I mean, I've had a family member that has had lifelong issues, and I've transported them around to get care, and I know how that can be and how far and great a distance and how far from family that can take the care to have those beds, 16 beds, 90 stay in is a fantastic thing. It's a great thing.
It's huge. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to add one other thing for your support for mental health. I think we shouldn't also overlook that as that building starts this spring, the mental health center that is going to be constructed there is a tremendous improvement from what we have today and how they will be dealing with their clients. And the second one, as I see Lori sitting back there, is their discussions on the anchor center and the things that have been identified that will improve that facility when it moves here as part of the reconstruction of these buildings. Those are two other things we often overlook, but have been big commitments in our space to improve our mental health support.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just say thank you so much for the work that you do. I remember a few years back as a candidate, this was one of the few advisory councils that reached out, as you had mentioned, to folks running to at least bring awareness to what it is that you folks do. So thanks for doing that and continuing to do that.
Very welcome. I'd like to do one thing that I traditionally do, and I'd like to ask the members of the LAC to stand today to be recognized for their many contributions they make. My presentation is not mine, it's their work. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, that brings us to 7.1, and the great Michael Thompson is going to bring some clarity to an incredibly complex, and all within what, 30 to 45 seconds? You're going to make this crystal clear?
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chair and Commissioners. I was actually going to start out by warning you I may go over my allotted 20 minutes that I requested, so thanks for the lead-in. I really appreciate the opportunity to come up this morning and share some very important information with the board and members of the public regarding a mailing that they're going to receive in 2 to 3 weeks from now, probably. And that mailing is gonna include, two different notices, with regard to property taxes, mostly impacting payable 2020, but it's the work that we've been doing over the last year here, to analyze the market and make those assessment changes. So I'm gonna cover first some of the inputs. That's the market update. What goes into the assessment changes that we actually make. I'll lead into that after I give some of those inputs, and then talk a little bit about what options are available to the public if they disagree with that information, or if maybe they do agree but there's still some challenges with the property taxes. There may be some options available to them, so I'm going to cover those as well. I always like to start by kind of getting our bearings. Where are we in this process? And so I put the timeline up. That's actually one full cycle, property taxation cycle from start to finish, with a little bit of overlap and sprinkling in from other cycles. But if you think of it as what we're talking about here today, the January 2nd value, based on sales all the way back to October of 17 now, so a year and a half ago is when we started looking at this 12-month sales study. And
Mr. Chair, Ms. Thompson, is it that long because it takes the state that long to aggregate the data, or because they're allowing time for more cases to bring more credibility and integrity to the data?
That's a good question. I think it's a 12-month study, and then we have to have the opportunity for our analysis and valuation finalization, and that's kind of what we've done up until about 2 or 3 weeks ago, still putting some finishing touches on that. But then there's an opportunity for the appeals process.
Okay.
And so that actually goes from March through June, and then it's going to impact your taxes the following year. So there's probably a lot of different inputs that go into the answer to that question.
It is a comment I've gotten a couple times, especially after this last year. We had some pretty amazing valuation changes. I think that's the nicest way to put it. And people would say, good grief, some of this is 2 years old. Why are we reaching back that far? What's going on? You're helping the public understand that there's a lot involved in this process. And
yes, thank you. That's a good way to put it. It's a 3-year cycle, and by the time you're actually paying your first half taxes next year, you're right, we're going to be going back 2 years to the start of that sales study period, and by the time you pay your second half taxes, it'll be about 3 years from start to finish. So
yes.
It does create a lot of confusion, and that's another reason I like to lead with the timeline. So we are here in March of 2019. I've marked that with the red arrow, and probably the most important timing for the public to pay attention to this information, these notices right now, because when you get your estimated taxes in November later this year, that tends to stand out a little more than a value change because it's dollars and cents. But I'm here to tell you, you're going to be forfeiting a lot of available options at that if you wait till that time. So the key here is, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about those individual notices a little bit later, but the key here is it's an important time. You're going to get some of those 2 notices in the mail very shortly, and that's what I'm here to kind of prepare you for. With that, I'll kind of go into the market update. What have we been seeing in the residential market? 3 main factors that are contributing to the market performance. Interest rates on the rise, still historically low. Foreclosure filings down again, lowest they've been in 16 years. And the supply of homes for sale is very low, historically speaking. So let's dig into a little bit of that information. This is a really long look back at interest rates, and I think we go back to about 1970 here. We're currently sitting around 4.35. That's 30-year fixed, and it's an average for the nation. So obviously that depends a lot on what your credit score is, how much down you can put. But overall, the average is about 4.35 on a 30-year fixed. I also highlighted back around 2005, it was around 6%. And I added that because I was considering buying my first house around that time. My dad said, 6% rates, Michael. You may never see this again in your lifetime. And he was really encouraging me strongly not to rent that apartment. And I think it just kind of adds context to where we're at. And when people talk about the rate coming up a little bit, and so now we're going to zoom in a little bit more short term. We go back to 2004. We actually went down all the way down to, just over 3% back in 2013. So, yes, they're up a little bit over the years, but historically they're still very low. What that translates to is there's access to financing, and the lower the rate, the more purchasing power you have. Foreclosure filings, again, is a big factor because what this is, competition. When there's 932 foreclosures out there, like there were back around 2008, that's all competing with people that want to traditionally sell their house. And anybody who sold a property back in those 4 or 5, 6 year time frame when it was peaking knows very well how that impacts their price that they're going to ask. And so this kind of gives you the split there of the traditional sales in blue. And this is a sale count each year. So we back at in 2011, for example, about maybe dipping down to 800 or 900 traditional sales, and actually the lender mediated sales, which is going to be foreclosures and short sales, actually was higher than traditional sales for a couple of years there. And what this is showing is over the last 2 to 3 years, we've basically flattened out. There's not a whole lot of that competition left in the marketplace.
Michael, is this just in Scott County? We're looking at the units here.
Yeah, so this particular graph is Scott County only. And then the final point that I highlighted, month's supply of homes for sale. This is what does the inventory look like? And you can see that overall for Scott County again, we're a little under 3 months of availability. That includes everything, all price points. And so the North Star MLS has some different segments for pricing, and that's why when you see the number, what about under 227,000? I moved to that because that's a number that they make it easy to sort by. But it's also important because there's been obviously a lot of important discussion about affordability of housing and entry-level homes. And so I like to show this contrast. The line looks very similar, but if you pay close attention, we were at just under 3 months on the other side overall, and now we're down to about a month supply. And so they figure based on the number of homes that we're selling on average each month over the last 12 months compared to how many homes are currently available, how long would that last us? And so if no new house came on the market in this price point, in theory, we would be out of any properties in this range in 30 days. And so what did this all lead to? I like to share some of the third-party MLS data because it's an outside source, and so we start with the 7-county metro area on this graph. Over the 12-month period, January 18, January 19, the average sales price is up about 5.2%. If we zoom into Scott County, the other reason that I use this data is it starts to show a lot of people when they think of the real estate market, they think about what they see in the news and read in the newspaper, and a lot of times that's a more high-level look. They're using data for the entire metro area or even statewide, sometimes national, and so it's easy to think, well, I saw on the news it said prices are up 6.7%, or excuse me, 5.2% in the metro, 7-county metro, and think that's about what I should expect. And the reality is we start to zoom in just to our county and it's up about 6.7%, again, average sale price. And then I use New Prague because it was convenient. I was out there last night talking to the New Prague City Council, and I like to zoom in again and show this is just now a jurisdiction level. It gets a lot more choppy, and now you've got some years where there was maybe even a decline over a 12-month period and some kind of flat areas. And you start to see the dip down more recently too, which if you look back at the pattern, it's not the first time it's happened, but gradually the prices have been going up since 2011 overall. This could be a seasonal change. It could be a sign of things to come. We don't know at this point, but even over the same 12-month period, we're up 6% in New Prague. Shifting gears a little bit to commercial, this is a Collier's report, end of year report, and it talks about vacancies up a bit, but it also attributes some of that to, and that creates a negative absorption to some of the closures, Toys R Us and Sears, some of those stores. But the rental rates are relatively stable. And if you look at the graph on the vacancy, for about the last couple of years, it's been relatively flat. This is a figure that we'd like to see it lower, not higher. So the vacancies actually trended up from 2015 to 16, but been relatively flat since then. Industrial, we've seen a really strong market in our county, and that also holds true with the Collier's report. Vacancies down, absorptions up, and rental rates are relatively stable again. But looking at the fourth quarter, we're still maintaining historically low vacancy with industrial in the metro area, and the Twin Cities saw 2.8 million square feet of new industrial completions in 2018. And then apartments, this was our strongest. When we think of commercial industrial apartments, for us, those are kind of how we segment these different property categories. And apartments by far perform the best out of any property type in our county and probably in the metro area over the last 12 months. Shakopee, Prior Lake, Savage rents are up about 14% on a one-bedroom and about 8% on a two-bedroom. And here I'm going to contradict my predecessor. He had mentioned a 0.9% vacancy rate, and he may be right. Might just been the timing of when he grabbed his data, or maybe just the sector that he was looking at. But the chart below indicates Scott County, if you look at the entire county, had about a 1.4% vacancy rate, which is still, to his point, extremely low compared to what you would expect in this for this property type for apartments. And I'll point out Scott County was the lowest in the 7-county metro area for that vacancy rate. And we've seen a lot of out-of-state investors coming in and purchasing some of the larger apartments, and part of that has got to do with the unemployment rate in Minnesota is very low, and in Scott County, even lower than the state average. So it's very attractive to investors to come in, and of course that's going to drive up some of those prices. And then even when we talk about apartments, we include 4 units and up. So even our 4-plexes and 8-plexes, those are considered apartments, and they go into those studies. This is kind of a overview of going from 2016 through 2018, 3 different sales all in the same city, and I will point out that last sale in 2018 appears to be a little bit higher quality. Maybe it's got a hip roof and some facade on the front there, but for the most part, investors looking at these would consider them very similar properties, and we've seen these prices per unit just continue to climb. We're continuously surprised over the last 3-4 years when we get an apartment sale at the price per unit that's being paid. So with that, I'm going to transition to, okay, how did all those inputs go into the assessment changes that we made this year? But before I get into changes to existing, I wanted to just kind of mention that we saw new construction have a huge uptick in residential, and that's I think we had about 550 new homes in 2017 that were built in the county, and roughly 715. So the percentage increase in new homes almost translates exactly to the value that was added in the residential, 27%. And I think it can be almost completely attributed to 50 additional houses in Shakopee compared to last year, or compared to 2017, and in Prior Lake, they just about doubled from about 100 houses to 200. That's about your total 150 increase, and I think that probably wouldn't surprise anybody who's been driving through those communities recently. Commercial industrial shows a decrease, and apartments almost doubled again, and I think, again, wouldn't surprise many people because there's been so many new apartment buildings going up as well. And then agricultural, there's some buildings going up relatively similar to last year at the same pace. So the average value changes for residential, countywide about 5.3% is what we increased. And, so using the averages, we've been asked, well, what's the average house look like? And could we find a house at $326,500 and show you that? Yes, but does that mean it's exactly the average house? Not necessarily, because that changes depending on what area you're in and all kinds of other factors. So I do caution, even when I'm showing this level of data, for those property owners viewing the presentation, this is the average, and so we do a lot more segmenting after just looking at the jurisdiction, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. We have to take all of the sales data that comes in over that 12-month period and reconcile it with Department of Revenue requirements. So they require we be at a certain level of assessment. That range is highlighted in yellow on this slide. It's 90 to 105% on the median ratio. So we get a ratio and we compare our assessed value, and then the sales come in and they look at, well, how did we have them assessed at in comparison to the actual sale price? They take the middle ratio in each city or township, and that's your median, and they judge your overall assessment level based on that median ratio. So this is another point that a lot of property owners, they individualize this to one sale and say, well, that sale has to be between 90 and 105, right? And we tell them, well, it's actually an overall median ratio. So if we plotted out every single sale, they would basically bracket those data points, those medians. This is where we left off last year. And so after we made all of our changes, comparing them to the sales that occurred before we set the assessment, this is where these different jurisdictions left off on their residential median ratios. And I would ask you to keep in mind on Helena Township here, that was the highest ratio where we left off at 97% last year. Moving into this year, the red dot, the small red dot, is where we are going into this new assessment. So we left off at these 93 to 97% median ratios, and the sales came in, and due to market changes, different samples of properties that came up over that year that happened to sell, this is where we started from before we made any changes. And you'll see that Helena left off at the highest and now started the next year at the lowest based on the actual sales. So it's factual information and comparing the sales to our assessed values. And so this plays a big part in how we change these values. So when you were looking at that first grid and you're maybe trying to figure out, well, why are some of these townships right next to each other going up at different rates? A lot of times they do have a little bit different property type within them, but more so than anything else, it's this Department of Revenue requirement that we keep these ratios in an acceptable range, and then we want to keep them somewhat similar. So we don't want one township at 91% and another one at 104%, because then we're unequally assessing. So there's a lot of things that go into this. It's into this decision-making process, but the biggest piece of the puzzle is the actual sales that occurred. And then this is kind of along those lines, a look back a little bit further. And I think it shows the good work that our assessor staff is doing in really trying to make sure that we're in the range, number one, but also make sure that within reason we have these different jurisdictions assessed at similar levels. And so the red line is the countywide residential median. And then focusing or drilling down into individual neighborhoods is something we also do. So even though the test is only at the jurisdictional level as far as the level of assessment, we know that maybe townhomes are performing differently than lakeshore properties, and lakeshore properties might be performing at a different rate than your split entries. And so we start segmenting these different neighborhoods, which we can group and stratify those different property types by as a starting point, and we're actually looking at the sales within those neighborhoods and coming up with median ratios even within the neighborhood. So we're starting there and we're trying to adjust values at that level, and then eventually it rolls up to the jurisdictional level. And then we also, within our computer model, we're accounting for different characteristics of the property. So our Rambler's more in favor now maybe than split entries, where maybe in the 80s, split entries were more in favor of being built at a more rapid rate. And so we want to look at how those things are impacting values as well. So we're actually stratifying and running reports and analysis based on some of these characteristics too, and adjusting the model as we need to. Agricultural values, most of our agricultural property that we have valued as something else. So if the highest and best use is determined to be something different than agricultural production, and a great example would be in Shakopee. If you've got a 40-acre tilled farm, probably if you were going to go to sell that, you would be marketing it as residential or commercial or industrial development land. That's how we're supposed to value that property. And so what this graph shows is, on the yellow line, about where we've valued per acre Shakopee land, and so it's consistently been going up as development ramps up. Probably won't surprise anybody. We're at about $75,000 an acre now for land in Shakopee. If that is a part of a farm that qualifies and is in green acres, they pay taxes on $7,200 per acre for this assessment. So that went up slightly. That's a Department of Revenue determined number. They increased the green acre tillable rate in Scott County from $7,000 to $7,200, and that's supposed to represent what a true farm value would be if there were no outside influences. Now that is a tax deferral, so it goes into perpetuity unless it comes out of the program. They pay back the most recent 3 years of savings. Commercial industrial apartments, different way of looking at maybe the graphs that I showed for residential. The blue is where we left off from last year, 95.6, 94.8, and 95% respectively. And then going into our new study, commercial 89.7, industrial all the way to 81, and apartments that's under 80 at 79.9. So this is the information we looked at and had to adjust values countywide in these sectors for. Commercial, again, 4 to 7%, on average probably roughly 5 or 6%. Industrial, out of those 11 sales, I think 3 or 4 of those were industrial condos. And so we've seen a huge desire for those, where you actually build a storage condo, an industrial building, and then you sell out the individual unit. So we're not talking about self-storage where people go and pay a monthly rent. We're talking about actually selling those units. And that goes into this industrial study, and it impacts what we do overall. So I think it's important to note, and the reason I'm going into that is because you might see, well, industrial and apartments look like they're kind of starting at about the same, but you went up a lot higher on apartments. And the reason we did that was we increased the industrial condos, I think 25% roughly. And the remaining 7 sales, the way that study looked was basically in that 10 to 13% increase range, so that our ratio came out to 95.6. Whereas apartments, whether it was the 4 units or the multi-building, large-scale apartment developments, they were all low, all of those ratios. So that was kind of an across the board. And then a final note on the commercial industrial tax tiers, because we had a lot of questions come in, particularly from our smaller towns or just any lower valued property in these categories. If you saw like a 15% value change, but you crossed one of these thresholds from 100,000, 150,000 value, you might have kicked into a state general tier, which is an add-on. Anything over 100,000 on commercial industrial has the state general taxes added on. And then if you cross that 150,000 threshold, your tax capacity goes up. So if it's $1 million property, this probably doesn't play a factor, but in some of these lower value tier properties, particularly in the townships or smaller cities, and there are some areas in the large cities, this may play a factor in, well, my value went up 10% and my taxes went up 16%. How did that happen? This might be a piece of that puzzle. We explained that a number of times, so I thought it was worth including. So moving into the appeal options. These are the notices you're going to get in a couple weeks. The blue one is the third in a series of blue notices you've received. Going back to this time last year, your first blue notice was your value notice. Then you had your estimate in November, and now you're getting your actual tax statement. The one that we want you to key on is the gold or yellow 2019 notice. And there will be an appraiser phone number listed on that notice. If you have any questions, you just want some information, or if you have concerns about the change and you disagree with that valuation, you can call that number. That'll get you to the perfect person based on your property type and jurisdiction. And then I'm including a little note in the bottom left there. There's also a little insert that tells you how you can sign up for email notices. If you sign up for that, you won't get the paper anymore, but you'll get the PDF. You'll get it a couple days earlier probably than you do in the mail. That's historically been true with that program. And then you'll be able to, if you're a person who scans that in anyways and saves it off into file, you won't have to go through that additional step, so we encourage people to do that. It also saves us dollars and cents when we're not having to pay postage. So you got your notice and you're not sure maybe if you agree with it, or you're pretty sure you don't. There's some tools that we have, and our excellent GIS team at the county has added a layer for the public that they can go into our public GIS, and we'll have this presentation PDF'd on our taxation site. So you can follow these links that I've put in, and this will get you to the GIS program where you can turn on this recent sales layer. So in this example on the aerial, maybe you live in this cul-de-sac, you're not sure what things are selling for, you disagree with the property value, you can quickly kind of see and take a lay of the land of what properties around me are selling for. And then if you want to dig into those, you can go into the electronic certificate of real estate value search tool, which the Department of Revenue has totally redone over this last year. It's actually a really nice search tool now, where before it was very cumbersome to use. And so you can really dig into the details of an individual sale if you need to do that. And this is an example of running one report for Helena. I put some inputs in there, hit enter, and then this is kind of the output. It gives you a nice list of the sales within the criteria you entered, and you can click on one of those eCRV ID numbers in the far left, and that's a new link to the actual CRV, and you can get quite a bit of information off of there. But let's say you've done that research. Maybe you know that you believe that the valuation is incorrect. Here are some of your options, and I'm going to say, and I can't stress enough, give us a call the person on the gold notice, let us know what you're thinking. We can answer questions, we can provide information, we can come out to the house, make sure the information's all accurate on the property. And so it's always best to start off with that informal appeal. Depending what jurisdiction you're in, and I'll say all of the cities and Spring Lake Township, you go to the right side to the open book, and really what that is an extension of the informal appeal process. We open up our office, it's on the notice, the date and time, but we keep it open into the evening so that people that can't get here due to work or other commitments, they have an extra opportunity to come in and talk to us and look at our information on that night. And then if you don't have any, if you're not successful with your appeal there and you still disagree, you can go to the County Board of Appeal. This Board of Commissioners has appointed a special appeal board, which works out excellent, because everybody on that appointed board is either a real estate agent or an appraiser who lives and works within our county. They're very familiar. They have their pulse. They have the pulse of the market figured out, and they are a third party that you can share your information with and have them make a determination. And then, of course, your final option is tax court. So If we do go back to that blue notice, although you don't have appeal options remaining with the county informally, you can still, up until April 30th of 2019, the year the taxes are due, file an appeal in tax court. 2 more slides, and they're all around what other options might exist. Those first 2 bullets, the property tax and special property tax refund, I'm going to cover on the next page, so I'm going to go quick over that. Senior citizen property tax deferral. There is a program if legitimately, you know, we've heard, hey, I'm going to be taxed out of my house. I've lived here for however long, and I don't have enough income to pay these taxes. Some of those scenarios might be covered here depending on age, income, how long you've lived there. You might be eligible for a deferral. Again, it's not lowering your taxes, it's deferring the difference. So you pay your property tax based on your income if you qualify, and then the deferred amount obviously accumulates until such time you would sell the property or otherwise no longer own the property. And then there's a small interest rate that's attached to that deferred amount, that not to exceed 5%, I believe. Disabled veterans homestead property tax exclusion. If you're a disabled veteran, depending on the level of the disability, you may qualify for $150,000 or $300,000 in value exemption, so exclusion. So this is not a payback. If, for example, you're a 100% disabled veteran, and let's say your property is valued at $300,000, that brings your taxable value down to 0. So a very robust program for those who are eligible. And then the land programs we touched on, Green Acres Rural Preserve, limiting the value that you're taxed on there, deferring it for a certain amount of time. There's also a special homestead for blind or disabled property owners that limits the tax rate on the first $50,000 in property value. And then again, make sure you understand your appeal process and timeline. And these are all links, again, so if anybody's watching, we'll have this uploaded as a PDF to our website, and you can just click right on there, and even the understanding your appeal process timeline will bring you to an FAQ that really gives you a little bit deeper dive in what you can do. But going back to the tax refunds, the biggest misconception we hear is, well, I already checked, I make too much money, I don't qualify. There's 2 different kinds here. So the regular homestead credit refund, start there, see if you qualify for that, and there is an income requirement. But the special credit, homestead credit refund has no income requirements. So basically, if you lived and homesteaded the property January of 18 and 19, your tax increased by more than 12%. The tax increase was more than $100, and you didn't make new improvements to the property, you probably qualify for that special homestead credit refund. And we've seen numbers on the amount that goes unclaimed of eligible people in it, and it's pretty staggering. So there's a lot of people out there that are eligible for this that don't claim it every year. And again, for purposes of today, this goes to your blue notice. So look at that blue notice. If that tax increase is more than 12%, really look into this. And with that, I'm finished. I again thank you for the opportunity to share this information in preparation for the notices being mailed in a couple weeks, and I would ask if you have any questions.
Michael, thank you so much for shedding light on a very complex issue. Members, any questions,
Mr. Chair.
comments? Commissioner Allwork.
Just a comment, and it's not specifically related to your presentation, but it triggers a thought. I would like us to study what other counties in the metro area are sending out with the notices. Both I guess I was originally thinking of the tax one, you know, there's a document that I sent copies of what Dakota and Washington had included with their notice. But I'd like to study, are other jurisdictions sending something from the county on the valuation notice? So studying both, what do we insert, what can we insert, what do we want to clarify with an insert, what would be helpful? I'd like to have us look at all that and maybe have that as a small report in a 15-minute workshop item in the future.
Thank you. I'd be happy to reach out to my peers in other counties and consolidate any examples that they will share and bring those
That'd be great.
forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair. So, Michael, what would cause just individual, like lots or land or houses to go up and spike a lot? Do you see a lot of those that happen? I've had a few people say their land or their assessments have gone up double or triple. Is that possible or common?
It's possible. I believe it's uncommon. I know that last year we did make some changes to some of the modeling that we did, and it resulted in a much better assessment. But it also, anytime you change that, the way that you're doing anything, it's going to impact people differently. And so when those changes occur, we encourage those people to give us a call right away. And it may be either that the new valuation needs to be modified, or that the previous valuation maybe shouldn't have been where exactly it was. And so it could, either one of those could be the answer, or even a little combination of both, I suppose. But we try not to have that impact going on year to year. And I think this year probably you'll see less of that type of thing. But by all means, give us a call when you see something like that.
And all that information will be on their notice of who to call exactly on that, on the bottom of that, or almost to the bottom of the page, correct?
Yeah, on that gold notice, it will tell you exactly who the appraiser is for your jurisdiction and your property type. So if you're commercial, there's a different person listed than if it's a residential property.
Okay. And what tax court? What does that cost? Is that a big cost or?
It really depends on how you go about it. So if you're a property owner and you can file on your own behalf, there's a filing fee that, depending exactly, it changes every year, but I think it's somewhere in between $200 and $300 to file a petition. And then if you go to small claims court, if you're a homesteaded residential property, or if it's under a certain value, you can go to the smaller division, and you can represent yourself. And there's a lot of information on the tax court website as to how you would try to put forth a successful appeal, a concise appeal. If you're a commercial property owner and you decide you want to file, I think the sky's the limit is where that can go. I think if you hire the attorney and they're billing for time, of course, hiring appraisers, third-party experts who are willing to testify in court is very expensive. And so that can easily run into the six figures to wage an appeal like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Michael, thank you very much for your willingness to come and share this information. I know you mentioned you were in New Prague yesterday, and I've been at a meeting at another local city hall where you're always willing to share this information. I've got one question, and I know the last third of your presentation kind of focused on this, but just an abundance of clarity. If somebody does have a question, and there's the prevailing theme, well, I can't fight City Hall, so it just is what it is. But being on this side of it, I've seen your group really try to work through and wrestle through some of these scenarios. But if somebody really has an issue, what's the one thing you would tell them to do?
Call us and talk to us. Come in and talk to us. Have us out to your property to verify information. I think the one thing I would say is every year we do receive a number of phone calls this time of year. And every year we make changes to the assessment, because with 58,000 parcels, it's really hard to be perfect, and we never have been, and I doubt we ever will be. That's what we try for, though. But the fact that speaks for itself that we do make these changes every year, that you can work with City Hall and try to address those concerns.
One more quick.
Yeah.
How many properties do we have in Scott County?
Roughly 58,000.
58,000. So to be perfect on that many would be pretty tough. Yep. Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to number 8, committee reports and commissioner updates. Start down to my left, Commissioner Ulrich.
Okay, on the 26th, I attended the county strategic plan meeting that we all attended at Elko New Market. The 27th, the Minnesota Valley Transit Authority Driver of the Year celebration and regular meeting that was held at Canterbury this year, and we recognized the driver of the year, full-time driver of the year, part-time, and runners up, and we celebrated the great work of Schmitty and Sons in providing the contract services for Minnesota Valley Transit Authority. The 28th, monthly, or every other month meeting, excuse me, with the Savage Mayor and Administrator. The same day, the Fish Board meeting. Then March 1st, the Scale Executive meeting, and the 4th, the meeting with our Administrator. That's the end of my report.
Thank you. Commissioner Beard?
On the 19th of February, after we'd had our housing discussion here a couple weeks ago, I was able to attend a ceremonial groundbreaking for the Benedictine Living Center at the Shakopee Community Center. That was a pretty significant event. I'm glad they didn't take us out to the actual site because it was about 7 below zero and the ground is frozen about 4 feet down. It was pretty impressive to see those chunks of dirt coming up like small icebergs. On the 22nd, I had breakfast with some Shakopee city officials just to maintain relationships and keep the lines of communication open. Later that day, I'm still a member of what's called the Transportation for Planning and Economic Competitiveness at the U of M. They had their semi-annual meeting at the Capitol in St. Paul, and I was privileged to attend that and discuss some interesting topics about stuff coming over the horizon in transportation technology. On the 25th, I attended the SHIP meeting at the Law Enforcement Center. I think we're reforming that. It's going to be called CHIP now instead of SHIP. More to follow on that. On the 26th, I also attended the strategic planning meeting over in Elko. 27th, that morning, mosquito control in St. Paul. Then I met with my monthly luncheon with the county administrator, talk about some issues of interest to Shakopee and the district I represent. Later, Commissioner Ulrich joined us, and we talked a little bit about the Met Council issue we've been involved with for over a decade now, and what we may want to do there. Later that afternoon, I attended the Intergovernmental Working Group at the Mystic Lake at Shakopee-Benwakating community, where the city of Shakopee and the tribe talked about the Shakopee riverfront redevelopment and their common interests and concerns about burial mounds and things along that line. On the 28th, I attended the next to the last meeting of the Blind Cloud Airport Joint Airport Zoning Board, which affects the city of Shakopee only peripherally, but it will mean that Valley Fair can't build a 1,000-foot tall tower on their property because the airport is close by. On the 1st, attended the Frank Boyle's retirement party at the Wild. Great time was had by all. And on the 4th, the Transportation Alliance Legislative Affairs Committee, I was able to be there briefly as they talked about the governor's plan for increasing all the taxes related to transportation, particularly ownership of automobiles. But the main thrust was the Metro Parks meeting with the House Committee dealing with legacy funding. I was able to attend that and fly the flag for Scott County. That's my report.
Thank you. Commissioner Wolf?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me, on the 19th, excuse me, on the 19th, I was at the Capitol for T21 and a couple other things that are going on there. On the 21st, I met with the Newmarket Township Board Chair to discuss a few issues out that way. On the 22nd, the State Health Committee met, the SHAC Committee. On the 25th, the Administrator, we had our monthly meeting, a little bit lively. We talked a little bit about computers and the IT department there. On the 26th, the workshop called at Elkin Market. On the 27th, Metropolitan Mosquito Control District. On the 28th, I was at the Vermilion Joint Powers Organization. Talked about a couple things there. They're ramping up for projects this summer. Also went to the Capitol to talk about a few things with a few legislators. On the 1st, Frank Boyle's retirement, and it wasn't nice seeing a lot of people that you don't see much anymore, so that have retired. And on the 4th, yesterday, the Parks had the meeting down at the Capitol that Commissioner Beard had talked about. I also attended the AMC meeting down there. There are a couple things there they talked about with opioids is still a big problem, or getting to be a bigger problem. And also the gas tax, 20 cents. It's funny they keep pushing around these big numbers on gas tax. I sometimes wonder if they just do a penny at a time every other year. I don't never like a tax, but that's 20 cents is a lot to write off. So then last night the Prior Lake City Council meeting. They talked about parks there, how many more they need and if they need less. Then Credit River had their township meeting. Then Cedar Lake had their monthly meeting, attended that, and that is the end of my report.
Thank you very much. On the 19th, what was it, a year or two ago, we were all out at the White House for the White House Office of Intergovernment. Was it last year? Seemed like 2 years ago. But anyway, they hosted a conference call on trade talks on the 19th, so I dialed in just to hear what the latest on that was, and no real resolution then or now. On the 23rd, had my monthly meeting with the administrator. I'm not sure if that's going to be called the penalty box or, you know, I get in trouble or, but whatever. We'll figure something out. Always very informative and great conversation, so thank you for that. On the, trying to think here, was the 26th, yes, the strategy meeting down in Elko. And then we followed up with the chair vice chair meeting right after. On the 27th, as was mentioned by Commissioner Beard, was also at the IWG, very, very serious discussions on very serious issues, and I'm just grateful to have open lines of communications here and hopefully in the future. On the 28th, attended the Fish Board meeting, and on the 1st of March, had a breakfast meeting with our chair, who again wanted to thank her for representing us at NACO today and yesterday and probably tomorrow. So with that, that includes my report. Leslie, County Administrator.
Mr. Chairman, 2 dates to mark here in March. One is March 19th. We got a request late last week to host a tour with the new Met Council Chair and our members, Deb Barber and Wendy Wolf, and they'd like to do it on March 19th. It would follow the board meeting. We'd meet here from about 10 to 10:30 and then get on the bus and go over to the ribbon cutting for Louisiana Lofts at 11. And then there's about a half dozen other things, the Dakota and 13 project, the Spring Lake Park, the Cedar Lake Park, DEMCON, the 41 interchange, things that we're involved in to see with them. We've invited Mayor Briggs and Mayor Williams and Chairman Weckman from Louisville to join us, as they'd like some local leadership as well. On the 28th of March is the advisory committee meeting, where we invite them all in from about 6 to 7:30, so make sure you have that on your calendars as well. I'm not sure if technology is good or bad here, but I just received a email from Ms. Geis, who's down at the legislature today, and said that Senator Pratt has requested a letter of support from the county on the renaming of Highway 282 to the Dick Ames Memorial Highway, and he would need the letter today. So I'm not sure if it's just a nod from a letter from the administrator supporting that, or if you have thoughts and want to take a couple minutes to discuss that, how you feel about that. It's kind of an odd request here.
Members, how would you like to proceed?
Fine with me. It's good.
Yep.
Support it.
It came up yesterday in another discussion. It's going to be discussed, I think, tonight at Savage City Hall as well. Thank you for reminding me. The House Transportation Committee Traveling Show is coming to Savage City Hall at 7 o'clock tonight. I intend to be there, and I think they may discuss that from the House perspective. Senator Pratt's looking at it from the Senate side. I would be supportive of that, yes.
Okay, we'll put a letter together for Commissioner Beer's signature and get that off today.
So we don't need a resolution or?
It doesn't need a resolution, it just said a letter of
Support's
support.
fine, yeah.
Yes, Commissioner.
Just a question. I plan on being there tonight as well. Do we need to do any reference to that or notice that if more than 2 of us are there
Are you,
tonight?
are you go?
We'll see what we.
I would look to Ron. I don't believe we do when it's a public meeting like that where you're not taking any action as a board. I think you could all attend that meeting. Do we need to notice that?
No, if you're all there.
Madam Chair, to submit the official business is actually the legislative business.
Right.
And we would be attending as
Correct.
interested citizens in the audience. so.
Yeah, I don't believe that requires then a posting for that.
No,
Okay.
not at all.
All right.
Good clarification.
But if Commissioner Ulrich's feeling badly about it, we'll just run him off or have him stand at home. We'll cover it for you here.
They have pills for this.
That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Looking to my right, do
That
we need
probably
to
should be in
recess
the
for attorney-client privilege?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Now, I'm very nervous to, hesitant to go to number 11 here. This is the last opportunity
Motion
for any
to adjourn.
procedural hijinks. We've got a motion. Is there a second to adjourn?
Second.
I'm still,
Take a vote.
No, you have to ask for discussion.
well, I'm waiting for this. I can see what's waiting here behind this pause. Any discussion?
Well, Mr. Chairman, since you brought it up, I do have a few comments I'd like about the history of adjournment, why it's important that you actually ask the board
You're
to
taking
adjourn.
notes, right? Okay, good.
But I'll stand down. In the interest of being between us and lunch, I'll stand down on my comments regarding adjournment matters.
All in favor?
I,
Meeting adjourned.
but I could have gone on for 20 minutes.
I